I have no fear whatsoever of anybody or anything.
Hey everybody, as I wait for my kid to get out of his Kung Fu class, I thought I would do a video based on a conversation that happened in the comment threads. Zixiv73A chimed in and said, "Atheism is incorrect. There's only one truth. Life from chance is a conclusion." I heard that and I chimed in and told him if he wanted to pose a question, he was welcome to do so, otherwise to move along. So he said, okay, you are basing your beliefs on a conclusion. Life appearing by chance is a conclusion. There's no proof that life came about by chance. My reaction to that was that it wasn't really a question, but I would try to make a response built on that comment. And he said, superb. Could you include irreducible complexity of a cell? Thanks. So, still not quite a question, but I'm going to go forward. So first off, I have a problem with the very criticism he has at the beginning, which is, I'm basing my beliefs on a conclusion. I don't quite understand what's wrong with basing your beliefs on a conclusion. Are we supposed to go through life gathering information, putting it together, comparing it to the world around us, coming up with a worldview, a formulation of all those ideas, and coming to a conclusion, and then are we supposed to ignore that conclusion and believe something wholly different? How are we supposed to work? How is believing in something based on a conclusion a bad thing? So right off the bat, I have an issue with the way this person thinks. He goes on and says, life appearing about by chance is a conclusion. There's no proof that life came about by chance. Now, this isn't really a decent argument, mainly because it's so easily flipped around to the other side. I can easily just replace a couple words and say life appearing by God is just a conclusion. There's no proof that life came about by God. If I were to say you were basing your beliefs on a conclusion that God created everything, would I be wrong in saying you can't base your beliefs on a conclusion? No, that doesn't work. So there's not really a good intellectual argument going on here. But he says there's no proof that life came about by chance. First off, I've never actually said how I think life came about because I don't know how life came about. I have ideas about the possibilities, but I don't know for a fact. I think it's going to be very difficult for us to ever know for a definite fact because time erases evidence. It's just the nature of things. But we do know that the building blocks for life exist in nature, and they come about through natural processes. And we can make a simple conclusion that since the building blocks for life can come about through natural processes, it is possible and probable that life came about through natural processes. So that is something we can have a basic assumption of. We don't have absolute proof of it because it's very difficult to find that type of thing. Time erases evidence. But we can at least see that natural processes are capable of doing the things that would cause the formulation of life. If we find life in other parts of the universe and other parts of our solar system, that will be further proof that natural processes can do this. And so that's why one reason I support the exploration of space. So since there is evidence that the natural processes of the universe can create the things that cause life, we now need to have an extra layer of proof if we are to say that something outside of the natural processes of the universe created life. And there's absolutely no evidence that anything outside of nature is necessary for the formulation of life. And since it is unnecessary to add it to the equation, we don't add it to the equation. It's the basics of Occam's razor, which would be don't multiply your unknowns. And since the unknown factor of something supernatural is not necessary to add to this equation, we don't add it to the equation. Until something shows us that it's necessary, we don't add it to the equation. And he goes on and says, oh, could I include irreducible complexity of a cell? Sure. It's kind of a blanket thing, but I'll add it. I'll touch on it. The issue with the irreducible complexity of a cell is a point that is made by intelligent design proponents. The basic theory is that a cell is so complex and the structure is so interdependent that you can't take out any element of it and have it still function as a cell. That would cause it to be irreducibly complex. You cannot take out anything and still have it function as a cell. And they use that as evidence that in order for a cell to exist, it must have come about in its entirety out of whole cloth. Somehow, are we saying that evolution caused a cell to just plop out, complete and total by itself? Because if there's no part of the cell, if a part of that cell was missing, it couldn't function as a cell. So it must have formed completely as a cell. And evolution doesn't have any mechanism for that. So it must have been through some supernatural means or other natural means. The problem with that is a basic denial of the fact that the structure of a cell has components in it that don't necessarily need to function as a cell. For example, if a cell doesn't have a nucleus, it doesn't function as a cell the way we know it. Or if it doesn't have a membrane on the outside of it, it doesn't function as a cell as we know it. But we know through the noticing and discovering different forms of life on this planet, and there are other forms of life on this planet other than cellular life, that you can have a structure without a nucleus or without a membrane and still have it function. It just doesn't function as an ordinary cell. A bacteria doesn't have a nucleus, but it still functions. It functions in a different way. Viruses don't have nucleus. They don't have, there's a few other elements in there, but they also don't have a membrane on the outside of it, but they still function. They just function differently than a cell. So the problem with calling the irreducible complexity of a cell proof that evolution doesn't work and that there has to be some other means is that they're denying the fact that the structures that are within a cell have functions or can have functions in other situations. So yes, if we take away an element of a cell, it no longer functions the same way that cell did. It no longer functions as a cell, but it may function in a different way altogether. It may have a different way of operating. So that's the thing about irreducible complexity of a cell. It fails to recognize that the structures and the components of a cell have functions and have the possibility of functions outside that of a cell. So yes, a cell in and of itself is irreducibly complex, but the pieces of a cell have functions other than for that cell. And so when those pieces are missing, it no longer functions as a cell, but it can function in other ways. And evolution doesn't care what it's doing. It doesn't care. It doesn't have a goal of a cell in mind. It just has a goal of keeping operating. And that's what it can do without all the pieces of a cell. It can still function in some way. So the irreducible complexity of a cell sounds like a really good point. It sounds like a gotcha moment because there's no argument against it. But the fact is, it's false. It doesn't really work. It doesn't hold water. It doesn't hold water when it comes to actually observing how science works. In order for you to believe in the irreducible complexity of a cell as proof for God, you have to ignore the actual facts of nature and science. So that's it for everything that ZigSiv73A had to say. I hope I addressed everything there. I think I did. Once again, everybody, thank you for coming up with questions. Keep them coming. Try not to be like ZigSiv here. Try to actually pose questions or interact with somebody else. Don't just use the forum for means of just spewing your platform and making broad statements without anything to back them up. I'm trying to foster conversation here. I hope I'm doing that. Thank you very much. Keep them coming. I'll talk to you soon.
That's my job. That's what I do. I don't lose. I win.
Is there no one on this planet to even challenge me?
Maybe you came by to congratulate me on last night's victory.